Tonight, you will lie down on a mattress that costs more than your grandparents' first car. You will set an alarm for exactly the same time tomorrow. You will check your phone one last time before the room goes dark. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, you will probably wake up, stare at the ceiling, and worry that something is wrong with you. But the real answer to what is happening to your body at night is far stranger than a soft mattress or a glowing screen. For most of human history, sleep did not look anything like this. No memory foam, no white noise machine, no carefully calculated sleep score waiting on a screen in the morning. Just a body, the dark, and whatever surface the earth happened to offer that night. And yet, that body still managed to rest, recover, dream, and wake up ready to survive another day in a world with no roof and no lock on the door. There was no mattress. There was no bedroom. There was no single block of 8 uninterrupted hours that you were supposed to hit every night like a quota. The way you sleep today is, in evolutionary terms, brand new. Strange even. So if you have ever felt broken because you can't sleep the way you're supposed to, you might be the one who has it backwards. Start with the simplest question. What did your ancestors actually sleep on? In 2011, an archaeologist named Lynn Wadley was excavating a rock shelter in South Africa called Sibidu Cave. Layer by layer, her team uncovered something remarkable. Bedding. Not scattered grass, but constructed bedding, deliberately built up in thick mats of sedge and rush, dated to roughly 77,000 years ago. That makes it the oldest known bedding on Earth. And here is the detail that should stop you. The bedding wasn't just soft plant matter thrown on the ground. The layers contained leaves from a tree called Cryptocarya woodii, a plant with natural insect-repelling chemical compounds. Your ancestors weren't just looking for comfort. They were engineering their sleeping space to keep biting insects away while they were at their most vulnerable. Think about that for a second. 77,000 years before the invention of bug spray, before the wheel, before written language, a group of early humans understood that where you sleep determines how well you sleep. They were optimizing their bedroom, just like you do, scrolling through reviews for the best mattress for back pain. And it wasn't a one-time accident. Wadley's team found that the bedding had been burned and replaced multiple times over thousands of years of occupation, layer stacked on layer like the world's slowest renovation project. Old, pest-ridden bedding was torched. Fresh sedge was laid down on top. People kept coming back to the same shelter, generation after generation, and kept rebuilding the same basic idea, a clean, dry, insect-resistant place to lose consciousness in. So the bedding wasn't random. But was the sleep itself anything like yours? This is where it gets even stranger. A historian named Roger E. Kirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, medical texts, and letters from pre-industrial Europe. What he found, published in his research on what he called segmented sleep, rewired how historians understood the night. Before artificial lighting existed, people across many cultures didn't sleep in one block. They slept in two. They called it first sleep and second sleep. You would go to bed shortly after dark, sleep for 3 or 4 hours, and then wake up. Not in a panic, not checking the time with dread. You would simply be awake in the middle of the night for an hour or two. People used this time to pray, to talk quietly with a partner, to tend a fire, even to visit neighbors. Then they would lie back down and sleep a second time until dawn. Doesn't that sound exactly like what happens to you at 3 in the morning? You wake up. The room is dark and silent, and you assume it's a malfunction, a symptom, something to fix with melatonin or a sleep app. But for the vast majority of human history, that exact moment, awake in the dark between 2 periods of sleep, was simply Tuesday night. It wasn't insomnia. It was the schedule. Kirch found references to this in hundreds of sources, scattered across centuries and countries. A French physician describing the best hours for conceiving a child as after the first sleep. An English court record noting a witness who saw a crime committed during the time between sleeps. A character in a story waking calmly at midnight to mend a stocking before lying back down. None of these people treated the waking hour as strange. It was simply furniture in the architecture of the night, as expected, as sunrise. So, when did the single unbroken block of sleep become the only correct way to rest? The answer is almost embarrassingly recent. Cheap, reliable artificial light, gas lamps, and later electric bulbs extended the useful hours of the evening and pushed bedtime later and later. Once people were going to bed later but still needing to wake at the same hour for work, the two segments of sleep got compressed into one. The midnight waking hour, once a normal part of the night, simply got squeezed out of existence. Your body, however, never got the memo. It is still, in many ways, running on the old operating system. Now here is where the story gets genuinely counterintuitive, because you might assume that without phones, without work stress, without blue light, your distant ancestors must have slept far more than you do, longer, deeper, more peacefully. A sleep researcher named Jerome Siegel decided to actually test this assumption instead of guessing at it. In 2015, his team strapped sleep-tracking devices onto people from 3 of the last remaining hunter-gatherer and pre-industrial societies on Earth, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. Groups with no electricity, no clocks, no mattresses, living about as close to ancestral conditions as modern researchers can ethically study. What did the data show? They slept about 6.5 to 7 hours a night. Not 9, not 10. Roughly the same amount, or even slightly less, than the average person sleeping in a city today. They had no fixed bedtime tied to a clock. Instead, they fell asleep hours after sunset and woke before sunrise, with their sleep onset tightly linked not to darkness itself, but to a drop in ambient temperature. Their bodies were responding to the cooling night air as a trigger to sleep, not to a number on a clock. And strikingly, almost none of them used a word in their own language that translates directly to insomnia. That single detail should sit with you for a moment. The condition that sends millions of people to pharmacies every year for sleep aids barely exists, linguistically, in societies sleeping the way humans slept for nearly all of our species' existence. Siegel's team also noticed something else. None of the 3 groups napped much during the day, despite having no jobs demanding they stay awake on a schedule. They simply weren't sleep-deprived enough to need it. Whatever was happening in their one consolidated nighttime stretch was apparently doing the job, even without a mattress, a pillow, or a bedroom door that closed. So if it isn't darkness, and it isn't some magical extra-long ancestral sleep, what is actually different? The honest answer is light, temperature, and permission. Your ancestors slept near a dying fire that dimmed gradually, instead of a screen that snaps off instantly. Their bodies cooled with the night air instead of staying locked at 70 degrees by a thermostat. And when they woke at midnight, nobody told them it was a problem. There was no glowing clock radio insisting they were failing at rest. They simply existed, awake, in the dark, until sleep came back for them. Compare that to your own bedroom. The streetlight outside never fully dims. The phone on your nightstand glows the instant you touch it, hijacking the exact hormonal signal that should be winding down. The thermostat holds the room at a steady temperature all night, denying your body the cooling cue it has relied on for hundreds of thousands of years to recognize that it's time to drop into deep sleep. You haven't just changed your mattress since the days of Sibidu Cave. You've quietly removed almost every environmental signal your biology was built to read. You, on the other hand, treat that same midnight waking as a 5-alarm crisis. You check the time. You do the math on how many hours you have left. You feel your heart rate climb with anxiety about being tired tomorrow. And that anxiety, more than the waking itself, is often what keeps you up. In other words, the thing that might actually be broken isn't your sleep. It's your relationship to waking up in the middle of it. Consider the industry built entirely around convincing you otherwise. Sleep aids, weighted blankets, apps that grade last night's rest like a report card and quietly shame you with a low score before you've even had coffee. An entire economy has formed around the idea that any wakefulness at night is a defect to be corrected. rather than a feature your body has carried for hundreds of thousands of years. None of it existed for your ancestors, and none of it was needed. Consider what your ancestors had that you don't. They had bedding engineered against insects, but no expectation of unbroken silence. They had 2 sleeps instead of 1, but no shame attached to the gap between them. They slept on woven plant mats in a cave 77,000 years ago, and somehow managed a more relaxed relationship with the dark than you do on a mattress with a 10-year warranty. So tonight, when you turn off the light, you are doing something your body recognizes from deep in its evolutionary memory. The bedding has changed completely. The room has changed completely. But the wiring underneath, the part of you that still expects a midnight wakening, the part that still wants the temperature to drop, the part that still listens for the world outside, all of that is identical to a person lying on a mat of sedge and insect-repelling leaves tens of thousands of years ago. And if you wake up at 3 in the morning tonight, staring at the ceiling, here is the real answer. The strange one, the one that's true. You are not broken. You are not failing at sleep. You are doing exactly what nearly every human who ever lived before you also did, on exactly this kind of night, in exactly this kind of dark. You will lie down tonight on a mattress that costs more than your grandparents' first car. But if you wake at 3 in the morning and the room is silent, you won't need an app, a pill, or a reason to panic. You'll just need to remember that you're not the broken one. You're the one still running on the oldest, most tested operating system our species has ever had.